This is a continuation to my introduction to Delving Deeper. If you wish to see the first part concerning wilderness travel, I've linked that in the description. This part deals with the dungeon crawling portion of the game. You can draw your own dungeon map, find one online, or use an online generator. Analog dungeon map generators can be found in the 1st edition Dungeon Master's Guide or the 5th edition DMG. Both are good and yield different types of dungeons, but are a little time consuming. I would advise against generating a dungeon during play, but it is certainly possible to do if you are caught particularly unprepared. In this example, I've generated a random dungeon from Donjon. It is a good idea to manually place the main treasure and monsters that you wish for the players to encounter, and then randomly generate the rest of the dungeon contents. Remember, the method I'm presenting is a fairly quick way of stocking the dungeon. Take as much time as you like to create yours. For this example video, I have expanded the party size that I created last time to 6 characters. Let's go over the basic dungeon crawling procedure first. Like many old school games, time is divided into 10-minute long turns. Movement is presented as inches in Delving Deeper, and 1 inch equals 10 feet. Traditionally, maps of this era are drawn with 1 square representing 10 feet. During a 10-minute turn, the player may move their movement rate twice. You can assume that the party travel at the speed of the slowest member. The slowest member of my party has a 6-inch movement, so the party can move 120 feet in a 10-minute term. This speed is of course very slow, but it presumes several actions that the party are taking. Firstly, the party will be moving quietly, attempting not to alert any enemies unnecessarily. They will also be observing their surroundings for enemies, treasure, and items of interest. They are assumed to be mapping the area as well. Remember that while a lantern or torch provides enough light to see by, that detailed investigation and cartography is somewhat hampered. Our party travels down the staircase and reaches a door on the right-hand wall. The first thing a party will normally do when faced with a door is listen to it. Characters generally have a 1 in 6 chance of hearing something on the other side, or 2 in 6 for dwarves and elves, or 3 in 6 for thieves. In this case, I roll a 2, meaning success. I use low numbers for success, though the rules tend to favour high numbers. This means the party will be able to hear what's on the other side of the door. But what is on the other side of the door? The following table shows the contents of a room, with outcomes vaguely similar to original D&D. I have extrapolated the chances of each type of room, and as you can see, the majority of rooms in the dungeon will be empty. Empty does not necessarily mean uninteresting, but more on that later. In our first room, I've rolled a 9, meaning that there are monsters on the other side of the door. We now refer to the random encounter table to generate the monsters. This part of the dungeon is level 1, meaning it is an appropriate challenge for a party of level 1 adventurers. We roll a d6 to determine the encounter type. I roll a 4, which means table 1. On that table, I roll a d20 and get a 19, indicating wolves. A somewhat strange result, but we will deal with it. Perhaps these are strange underground wolves and we can describe them as being different to their above-ground cousins. Remember that any monster that the players encounter can be reskinned and described in a fashion which makes them less recognisable. In fact, I like to do this with most of the monsters, to heighten the sense of the unknown. Now we know what is inside the room, and the players are aware that something is there, we can attempt to enter the room. In Delving Deeper, all doors in the dungeon are considered stuck, and an open door check is required. This even counts for doors which have previously been opened, as they are presumed to swing shut once the party has moved on. If the open door check is failed, the door does eventually open, but after much toil, which will alert the denizens on the other side and trigger a wandering monster check. A successful roll indicates the door is opened instantly and the party surprises the enemy within. The party succeed on their open door check and the wolves are surprised. There are 1d10 wolves in the room. I roll a 6. This is the number appropriate for level 1 of the dungeon. If wolves are encountered on level 2, there would be 2d10, and on level 3 there would be 4d10. If the party encountered an enemy appropriate to a lower floor, there would be half as many, with a minimum of 1. This is a way of balancing encounters to some extent. One more thing before we get into the fight is the monster reaction table. The temperament of the monsters encountered should be decided by the referee, but most should be hostile. Unintelligent monsters always attack, while intelligent monsters will act based on their judgment of the situation. Chaotic creatures will almost always attack lawful creatures and vice versa. In the event that the referee wishes to randomly determine a monster's attitude, the reaction check table can be used. Using the table should therefore be a rare occurrence, and most relevant to NPC encounters. Having said that, I tend to use the reaction table more often than expected in the rules, as interesting scenarios can be generated from unexpected results. In our example though, the wolves will simply attack. During the surprise round, the characters will take a free round of unanswered actions, and their attacks are at +2 to hit. Actions that the party take during their turn are said to occur simultaneously, but the referee may judge the order. For simplicity, I would advise either using the BX turn order procedure, or to resolve actions in order of players around the table. I don't intend to get into the intricacies of combat in this video. For simplicity, I will assume every entity on each side is able to attack, and I will randomize the targets. Delving Deeper uses a scale of 1 inch to 10 feet and 1 melee turn, which I'll probably refer to as a round, as 1 minute. I much prefer a 10-second round, as miscellaneous actions such as drinking potions can be more easily gauged during that time. I almost always consider a combat to take up 1 10-minute dungeon turn for the purposes of tracking torches and rolling for random encounters, unless there is a specific reason that a combat should take less time. This turn also includes a short rest period after the fighting. With all that out of the way, let's resolve the combat with those 6 wolves. Wolves have an armor class of 7, 1 hit dice and 18 movement. I roll 6d6 to determine their hit points, getting a 4, 2, 6, 2, 1 and 5. The dwarf, elf and human fighter will run into the room and attack first during the surprise round. This is the combat matrix that is used. A level 1 fighter requires an 11 to hit armor class 7. During the surprise round they receive a +2 bonus to attack, and I roll the following results. By the way, the names of the characters are just 3 randomly generated letters. I don't bother to name the characters until they reach level 2. The human and dwarf fighter both hit. The dwarf gets a +1 bonus to damage due to high strength. 2 wolves are killed in this case. Next, the thief and magic users decide to attack. This is a somewhat risky strategy, but with the element of surprise they deem it as a better choice than waiting at the back or wasting spells. Their attacks result in another kill and an injured wolf. At this point, the referee can choose whether to check for morale on behalf of the monsters. There are only guidelines to suggest when morale should be checked, such as when surprised, after losing a third of their number, or being attacked by a fearsome enemy such as a demon or a dragon. Considering the wolves have been surprised and have lost at least a third of their number, I think it is suitable that they roll for morale, though the rules dictate that unintelligent monsters need never check for morale. I think I would consider wolves intelligent and presume unintelligent means mindless, undead, oozes, plants, etc. I roll a 10, which gives the result press for advantage. The wolves do not run, and I interpret this result to mean that they will attempt to single out the least armoured opponents. I roll a d6 for initiative this round, scoring a 6 for the PCs and a 1 for the wolves. Therefore, the characters attack again with the following results. Note that they do not get the +2 bonus for surprise this round. According to the rules, combatants may surround their enemies if they outnumber them, and some may attack from behind, granting a +2 bonus to attack rolls. This is of great benefit to the thief as well, but it does require more management of the battle situation, which is difficult to adjudicate when playing Theatre of the Mind. So for the time being, I'm not going to use this rule, despite the very positive impact it would have on the thief's attack. With these attacks, only one wolf remains, and he attacks one of the magic users. A 1 hit dice monster attacks the same as a first level fighter. He hits the magic user for 3 damage, dropping him to 0 hit points, and killing him. I will quickly resolve the rest of the combat and presume that the wolf will be killed. The unlucky magic user is the first of probably many casualties, as this is a very dangerous game. I will quickly note that while I don't recall it being specified in the rulebook, I think that a very minimum party size should be 6 characters, with somewhere between 8 and 10 characters being optimal for a challenging yet fun experience. This may mean that your players have multiple characters, but delving deeper is very simple and character actions are straightforward. As we determined on our roll for the room contents, the wolves have no treasure, so the only reward the characters receive from this encounter is experience. Like many old school games, experience is primarily earned by collecting gold, with each gold piece value equaling 1 experience point. Killing monsters yields 100 XP per hit dice. I like to divide the XP amount by all those who were involved in the fight, even if they died during the fight, as they were still instrumental to the victory. Therefore, each remaining party member receives 100 XP each. The party have been adventuring for 2 turns, one to get to the first room and another one for the combat and rest afterwards. The referee is expected to roll for wandering monsters at the end of each turn, with a 1 in 6 chance of one occurring. You may wish to make additional rolls for wandering monsters each time an open door check is failed, whenever there is a combat, or any other time that the party make a substantial amount of noise. In this situation, I do not roll any random encounters, so the party proceed to investigate the southern door, which is locked. After a listen check yields nothing and a successful open door check does not budge the portal, the thief steps up with his lockpicks and has a 3 in 6 or 50% chance of opening the lock. He succeeds, and I would rule that these 3 actions of listen, open and lockpick would take about 5 minutes or half a turn. Therefore, the party can move another 60 feet to continue their turn. At the end of the turn, I roll for wandering monsters and roll a 1, indicating that there is a wandering monster. As mentioned before, while delving deeper indicates a 6 is required for a wandering monster, I tend to prefer using low numbers instead. I roll to see if the PCs are surprised, which they are. As they are in a corridor and carrying a light source, I presume that the monsters can easily see them and are not surprised. As they are surprised, the encounter distance is 1d6 times 10 feet, as opposed to 2d6 times 10 when not surprised. I roll a 3, meaning the enemy suddenly emerges from the darkness beyond the torch light and attack the lead character. It is worth coming up with your own wandering monster table, but in this case I'm simply going to use the same method used earlier to generate a group of 8 large centipedes. For the sake of expediency, we will presume that the combat was swift and brutal and resulted in a victory for the PCs as they continue north to the next room. The party will continue to explore in this fashion until they become too depleted of resources, lose too many companions, or are satisfied with their progress. Remember to track light sources carefully and remind the players that they must rest for 1 turn each hour. It is likely that they will need to make multiple delves into the dungeon before they consider it cleared, and the referee should intermittently restock the dungeon during periods when the characters are not present. I will briefly discuss the other room types that you will come across during dungeon generation. Remember that you should already have stocked 1 room with the treasure generated at the beginning of the last session, and come up with at least 1 specific encounter. I think last time we decided on orcs. For any rooms with treasure, we only use the treasure type associated with the monster if we can accommodate the amount of monsters that constitute a lair. For example, if we have a room of treasure guarded by hobgoblins, we would use treasure type D, but there would be 2d12 times 10 hobgoblins. Otherwise, we use the alternative method of treasure placement. This method is also used for unguarded treasure and trapped treasure. So the alternative method is 4d4 times 100 silver pieces per dungeon level. There's a 50% chance of 2d6 times 100 gold pieces per dungeon level, a 5% chance of 1d6 gems plus 1 per dungeon level, a 5% chance of 1d6 jewelry per dungeon level, and 5% chance of a magic item per 2 dungeon levels. That averages out at about 1,000 gold pieces per treasure room per level, so long as the valuable gems and jewelry are rolled. Another type of room to be discussed is trick or trap. There is a table in the rulebook to help generate these, but it is skewed somewhat towards architectural tricks, such as sloping passages and shifting walls. This is one area where you can spend your time coming up with something strange and devious, but I find it is one of the more difficult aspects of design. You'll want to make something interesting to challenge and surprise your players, but not trick them arbitrarily or frustrate them. It is worth stealing liberally from other sources when you can. The Tome of Adventure Design for generating ideas, any of the Dungeon Master's guides for lists of traps, or the Traps Digest from OED Games. Whenever you discover an interesting trick or trap in another module, it's worth making a note of it for future use in your adventures. The final room I want to discuss is the Empty Room. This room has neither monster nor treasure, there are no tricks or traps, but it does not have to be void of interest. Empty rooms can be used to foreshadow or offer hints for other things in the dungeon. They can be safe rooms, and if so, you should explicitly indicate that fact to the players. You can also add mundane objects into an empty room as well, that can be used somewhere else in the dungeon. Storage rooms can contain building materials, tools, food, and so on. Empty rooms can also be used to highlight the dungeon's theme or demonstrate the strange and alien nature of the mythic underworld. A room should never be left completely blank unless for a specific purpose. At the same time, you want to be careful not to make the room too interesting, lest the players spend a long time investigating it. So there we have it, an introduction to dungeon exploration in Delving Deeper. I hope this video has been useful and has inspired you to try out Delving Deeper for yourself. Let me know in the comments your thoughts, and if you'd like to see more. If there's enough interest in a solo play of Delving Deeper, then I will gladly oblige. If you'd like to support this channel, leave a comment, subscribe, or you can even pick up one of my books at DriveThruRPG. And as always, thanks for watching.